Well, here's a horrifying and terrifying story we have to discuss, which likely will blow up later today and potentially lead to class action lawsuits and maybe even some massive government fines. The Entertainment Software Association, which is a trade group that represents and protects this video game industry, some of its notable members include video game publishers such as Bethesda, Activision Blizzard, Electronic Arts, Konami, Nintendo, Tencent, THQ Nordic, Ubisoft, Epic Games, Capcom, Square Enix, Gearbox Software, Sony, and many more. The ESA largely is responsible for lobbying on behalf of the best interests of the video game industry. As some of you might know, the ESA has successfully defended video games from many politicians who want to maliciously blame mature games for real-life violence, but more recently, and really for the last few years since the whole Star Wars Battlefront 2 loot box debacle, they've been battling legislation worldwide to regulate or ban loot boxes and other forms of predatory monetization mechanics. Right now in the United States Senate, the ESA is trying to defeat a bill that was introduced by Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, which would ensure video games that are marketed to children would be prohibited from implementing any form of pay-to-win mechanisms, and additionally all of these games would be forbidden from selling loot boxes to children. That bill is still active and ongoing and has received bipartisan support, but outside of the lobbying work, the ESA is also responsible for organizing the Electronic Entertainment Expo, or simply put, E3. This, of course, is an annual event which has some of gaming's biggest companies attend to reveal new hardware, software, and a lot more. In recent years, E3 has become less of a trade event and really has started to fade, with key companies such as Sony, Activision Blizzard, Electronic Arts, Nintendo, and Take-Two Interactive, some of the biggest gaming industry leaders. They've either completely not attended or decreased their involvement. But this year, E3 2019 was pretty massive, at least in terms of excitement, with some of the highlights including Keanu Reeves having a surprise appearance on Microsoft's E3 stage to reveal his involvement in CD Projekt Red's highly anticipated Cyberpunk 2077. Besides just that, during or around E3, there was also reveals for all kinds of big upcoming games, which includes Watch Dogs Legion, Halo Infinite, Marvel's The Avengers game, Doom Eternal, and Final Fantasy VII Remake. But here's where we get to the horrifying part. It has been uncovered that over 2,000 games journalists, analysts, YouTubers, and streamers from Twitch and Mixer have had their information doxed because the ESA failed to secure their personal data. This may actually be one of the worst blunders I've ever seen and could have enormous consequences to the ESA and this E3 event. Former niche gamer journalist Sophia Narwitz was the first to break this story. Link will be in the description to her video on this screw up, but as she noted on Twitter about this massive debacle, the ESA was warned of this file over a month ago. This I learned tonight. I also emailed/called them late last night before I ever considered publishing my piece. So yes, it appears a document with the personal information of over 2,000 individuals working in this industry has been public for about over a month. This document has now just hours ago been removed from the ESA's website, but it's way too late. The damage is done, and unfortunately this document, which includes phone numbers, personal names, addresses, and more, is being passed around all over the web. Just some of those who have been impacted by this debacle with their personal data now out there includes journalists, reporters, or writers at IGN, RPG Site, GameRanks, Destructoid, Screen Rant, USA Today, the BBC, Polygon, Tech Radar, ABC News, The Hollywood Reporter, BuzzFeed, DualShocker, CNN, CNET, Game Informer, GameZone, Niche Gamer, Newsweek, Nintendo Life, PC Gamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, The Verge, Vice, VG247, Variety, WCCF Tech, Twinfinite, GamesIndustry.biz, Games Radar, Eurogamer, and many more. Some YouTubers impacted includes Inside Gaming, Kinda Funny Games, Young Yeah, SkillUp, and The Game Theorists. This is as bad as it gets, and this is a warning to really anyone who attended E3 2019 and gave their personal information to the ESA. Your information is out there, and I would consider contacting your local police department and changing your phone numbers for your personal safety. I will also advise contacting maybe an attorney because this is unacceptable, and I have little understanding of why the ESA needed in the first place to collect home addresses. This is just so reckless and puts so many in danger. Now, Sophia Narowitz, who broke this story, did reveal further that it appears some affected by this leak are already preparing legal action. She took to Twitter claiming, "This story just got juicier. Another source has reached out, and I've been told there's a group of content creators already gearing up for a lawsuit. This will be put forth on Monday or Tuesday, and on top of that, a few big name companies are following suit." This honestly is the least surprising update, and I guarantee the ESA is in massive financial trouble, and I promise you there will be fears of attending any future events held by them because of this mess. I did reach out to Sophia, who further elaborated on the situation and the backstory of how this was brought to her attention. She revealed this document was being passed around for the last month, and someone contacted her about the document, which, might I add, up until yesterday was still accessible on the ESA's website if you knew the right page. She further told me that she called and emailed the ESA at 3 and 4 a.m. this previous morning and contacted a journalist with Vice. Being I'm relatively small, I figured the ESA would ignore me. They did. I never got a reply, though they did remove the web page. However, they left the file in their servers, so it was still cached elsewhere online. On top of all this, it's been revealed that they were alerted to this over a month ago by another source came forward who worked with the ESA and said they knew of this risk since February. It appears they have failed time and time again. It's astounding. VentureBeat, who was affected by this data leak, was the first to run an article on this mess, and they did get a response from the ESA, who told them in a statement, ESA was made aware of a website vulnerability that led to the contact list of registered journalists attending E3 being made public. Once notified, we immediately took steps to protect that data and shut down the site, which is no longer available. We regret this occurrence and have put measures in place to ensure it will not occur again. This statement is pretty much rubbish BS. Richard Hogue, a lawyer, criticized the statement on Twitter, saying, "So again, tweet's not legal advice, getting a workout, but vulnerability seems incorrect. The note about the data not being available seems incorrect, and they really need to at least reach out to everyone affected." Something, yeah, I agree with. Also note that "was made aware" definitely avoids the primary question associated with all breaches. When? That in and of itself may be telling, since it looks like they put it up themselves. There was nothing to be made aware of. Folks are right to be upset about a response like this. So it's a terrible statement that fails to even mention how their website had a publicly available link to a document that wasn't secure in any way, which has personal information of almost all the media that attended E3 2019 and gained badges from them. Additionally, as I already mentioned earlier, the page which had the link to the document was still left on the ESA servers and is now being spread all over the internet and puts so many people's lives in danger now. VentureBeat did mention this and some of the penalties that the ESA could likely face now. While this breach could expose people to certain threats, it could also hurt the ESA's bottom line. Companies pay the organization a lot of money to show up to E3, and part of the reason the trade show is worth that price is because the company has a spreadsheet with the contact information for popular YouTubers and influential media personalities. If people are more hesitant to share that data at E3 2020, suddenly the show is potentially less valuable to attending developers and other companies. The ESA website was likely also accessible from Europe, and it contained info for European members of the press. That could turn this into a GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation issue. That is the EU regulatory framework that obliges any company that collects data to meet certain assurances of security. The maximum fine for a GDPR violation is 20 million euros. Personally, I'm still so puzzled how reckless the ESA has acted with this private information, but furthermore, this is an organization that has gone through a disastrous year, with Variety running a story just 2 months ago titled "Inside the Disarray Facing the Video Game Organization Behind E3." And Variety reported in the past 6 months alone, half of the association's leadership have either quit or been fired. And a survey of member companies conducted by Variety shows waning faith in the organization and its effort. An internal survey obtained by Variety also indicates a lack of trust by the general public of the game industry, which isn't very difficult to believe, considering the greed and manipulation that this industry enables with things like surprise mechanics. But this report was and is extremely concerning. Mike Gallagher, the now former CEO and president of the ESA, was running the organization into the ground, with morale under him being described as terrible, and many employees claimed he was a boss who was very difficult to work with, saying he was seen as manipulative, moody, and sometimes nasty. He told at least one person in the game industry that he liked to pit his employees against one another to elicit the best work from them as they vied for his approval. He would occasionally send what sources said were vicious, belittling emails to employees. The Entertainment Software Association's board of directors includes the chairman, Robert Altman, who also is the CEO of ZeniMax, which is the parent company of Bethesda Softworks. As far as I recall, Electronic Arts' Andrew Wilson, Take-Two's Strauss Zelnick, and Activision Blizzard's Bobby Kotick are also board members. Just recently in May 2019, it was announced by the ESA's board that Stanley Pierre-Louis was the new CEO and president of the ESA. Robert Altman saying Pierre-Louis would lead our gaming industry through this period of growth and opportunity. The board and the industry looks forward to his leadership of the ESA. Maybe the organization turns it around, but this latest and probably the biggest screw up to hit the ESA will come with many consequences. Some of the early reactions to this big doxing news includes former Blizzard producer Mark Kern, who emphasized how bad this is, VentureBeat's Jeff Grubb saying don't ask for people's addresses if you can't ensure their security, people can get hurt. I kind of feel like I have to call my local police and warn them about the potential of swatting. Is that overdramatic? I don't know, but knowing who has this information makes me think it's not. Eurogamer's Wesley Yin Poole saying the ESA journalist data leak is a disgrace and I'm worried for friends and colleagues affected. There is much to answer for. Additionally, Eurogamer's editor Ollie Welsh saying it is absolutely outrageous negligence. YouTuber Keemstar highlighting the situation and saying, I literally found out because a few people texted me from new numbers because they had to change their cells. Right now, at least in the United States, it's still very early in the morning and many are going to wake up to this disastrous news, but this definitely is a warning to anyone who attended E3 2019 that your data is out there. I also did want to emphasize with this video that the ESA, which represents much of this video game industry, has a record of chaos here in 2019, and accidental or not, this happened. And it's hard to understand why this document wasn't password protected or secure in any way at the very least. E3 2020 likely is going to be massive considering the next generation of consoles are coming in holiday 2020. But there's also some big game announcements to be made, which includes, I imagine, Todd Howard taking Bethesda's E3 stage revealing their next upcoming RPG Starfield, and I'm really left wondering if this situation will or could impact next year's show in any way. Anyway, what is your opinion on this colossal screw up by the ESA? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video form, so do make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games, and again, thank you for joining. Consider subscribing for more videos, hopefully less like this, and I'll see you later. July really has not been a kind month to Activision Blizzard and Electronic Arts. 2019 as a whole has not been a good year for these gaming companies as their financial troubles become much more obvious, with hundreds of employees being fired, studios being shut down, microtransactions only increasing, and becoming more predatory in games like Black Ops 4. Governments worldwide are investigating these companies' monetization systems, executives are jumping ship left and right, and in the case of Activision, the next Call of Duty game after Modern Warfare seems to be in flames right now, with the developer Treyarch jumping in to try and save the day. Electronic Arts, on the other hand, is still trying to revive BioWare's Anthem, which continues to struggle to find a foot, and Bethesda, a privately held company, appears to be in need of money based on the greedy microtransactions recently introduced to Fallout 76. Like I said, 2019 has really been a rocky year for these gaming publishers. Employees and consumers have enjoyed the consequences of these companies' failures, but there's at least a few people that probably aren't sweating all that much, and that is the executives remaining at the top, including Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick and his $30 million annual salary and his $7 billion net worth. Arguably gaming's greediest executive who simply has no care or interest in being pro-consumer or even pro-employee. I sincerely doubt the guy cares much at all about gaming, which is likely why I imagine Blizzard will continue changing, embracing the horrible business models that are forced upon Activision developers like Treyarch. Today we are going to be discussing all the latest madness hitting Activision Blizzard, Electronic Arts, and Bethesda. These quote-unquote industry leaders, and yes I have that in quotes, get away with a lot of nonsense, and it really can't stay this way. In July, both EA and Activision Blizzard enjoyed billion-dollar losses in stock market value, value, and we're going to discuss some of the reasons why that has happened and what it means moving forward. But as usual, if you do enjoy this content and want to show your support for gaming news like this, please consider hitting that like button, subscribing for more, and turning notifications on so you do not miss out on any new content. Also, make sure to check out my Twitter account. I'm very active over there, giving my take on a lot of other things that I don't quite get into video form. Hideo Kojima recently attended San Diego Comic-Con, and he made some rather interesting comments about the Battle Royale trend. And while many have seen it as a shot at Fortnite, I really think it's more of a shot at the whole industry and how gaming publishers like Bethesda, EA, and Activision latch onto the popular money-making trends that creatively may not be what players want, but financially it's what they feel makes the most sense. YouTuber The Grumpy Gibbon captured the following footage which has Kojima's comments being translated.
So what I do is I want to bring something different for people to maybe difficult to chew and chow down so that it really leaves a mark when you digest my works and then move forward in your life because you remember that feeling, and I want to give that kind of stimulation when I create my games.
独立して一番簡単にしてるのは無人島にオンラインで行って徐々に打ち上げすることが食べれるそれが僕がやることで
So when I first started my own production, the easiest way to make money was to create something online on an island that everyone goes and shoots each other, but I didn't want to make that.
What I find so fascinating about this footage is the passion that Kojima has for his games. As you likely saw in my most recent video, it's clear that there are creative companies still out there like CD Projekt Red not looking to suck your wallets dry, but to actually entertain you with something innovative and unique. But what Kojima specifically says about Battle Royale is of course something to laugh about, but I don't think he was joking. The EAs, Activisions, and Bethesdas all have jumped in on the Battle Royale trend because they view it as the path to easy success and money. Obviously that has not been the case always, as multiple Battle Royale games have vanished and others like Battlefield 5's Firestorm and Red Dead Online's 2 Battle Royale modes never gained really any interest or traction. But EA saw immense success with Apex Legends, got that with Black Ops 4's Blackout mode just last month. Bethesda needed something to jumpstart interest in Fallout 76, and they got that with their Nuclear Winter. Outside of the Battle Royale craze, you have these same companies jumping into the live service bandwagon because they're doing what financially makes the most money, rather than what creatively probably makes the most sense for players. And that's the problem that this gaming industry has right now. Publishers with amazing, talented developers and franchises, and they're wasting what they have by chasing trends. Kojima sure does make some very unique and different experiences. What I love and appreciate the most is that he's doing his own thing. His studio isn't looking right now and making the most money. They're making Death Stranding, a game that I still don't quite understand what it is about, but it definitely has my interest because of Kojima. Now, I next want to pivot to each publisher and their latest problems. Activision has showed its true colors in 2019. Their unsustainable greed with the Call of Duty franchise has forced themselves down a very dark road. Black Ops 4 slowly has become a greedy abomination that seriously doesn't deserve anyone's time and or money. What Activision has been doing with that game is pathetic, but when revenue is low, they always go for the predatory monetization nonsense because they know it works. This is exactly why I have little faith in the upcoming Modern Warfare game being anything but anti-consumer trash a few months post-launch. A recent Kotaku report outlined what we all kind of already knew. The developers working on these Call of Duty games have absolutely zero control over anything monetization. Kotaku's Jason Schreier reported in the months following Black Ops 4's release, Call of Duty players grew frustrated with the gradual implementation of microtransactions and loot boxes, and some Treyarch developers said they felt that pain. In interviews, many said that they were just as frustrated with publisher Activision's never-ending quest for increased revenue, and they were frustrated with the lack of influence they had on it. One of the common complaints I heard from lower-level Treyarch staffers was that despite putting in night after night and weekend after weekend, they were rarely allowed to offer creative input on the game. You want to know why they aren't offered input? Because creatively, it gets in the way of making money, which is all these executives truly care about. Call of Duty yearly brings in billions in revenue, but it never is going to be enough. The bar always has to keep being raised, and at this point I wonder what else can they really do to keep this franchise growing. Now, to the Blizzard side of things, all is not well as the executive departures keep on coming. Recently, it was announced yet another co-founder of the company was leaving. Frank Pierce announced, I believe it was 2 Fridays ago, that he was leaving effective immediately. As noted by Ars Technica, it appears that Pierce's decision to leave the company is not something that is sudden, but something that's been planned for a while, as Pierce last year stepped into an advisory role to help with the transition. Based on the timing, one does have to wonder if this decision to leave was around the same time Mike Morhaime made his announcement. Either way, as was reported last year by Kotaku, Activision has been having a growing influence over Blizzard, which for the longest time enjoyed autonomy. But that is no more, and with 2 of the 3 co-founders of Blizzard both departing late last year, it does have me even more concerned with what may become of Blizzard in the future, with potentially valuing monetization over quality. Something that isn't unbelievable when you consider what has happened on the Activision side of things in recent years with Call of Duty, and even with Bungie's Destiny. Bungie was not owned by Activision, but was simply partnered up with them for Destiny, and they notably had disagreements with the future of Destiny 2, with Activision wanting more monetization systems implemented to make up for the poor sales. Bungie at the very least had some control. They made a deal and ended their toxic partnership with Activision, something they celebrated, but unfortunately, the other studios and developers under Activision Blizzard do not have that option as they are owned by the parent company. Activision Blizzard's stock market value in the last year has plummeted by around 40%, and I fear what's to come is an increase in predatory monetization across the board because time and time again the executives that remain have proven that they just don't value or care about their consumers or even employees. Hell, it was revealed a few weeks ago that Blizzard was hiring Hearthstone community managers, which is odd because just about 5 months ago they laid off the whole team. This obviously angered the hundreds of employees who were let go, who remain jobless. Quite pathetic, to be honest, that leadership didn't consider, rehiring the people that just held the positions. But I mean, maybe this shouldn't be surprising when most of these executives and leaders are constantly incompetent. But next we have is Bethesda, who we recently talked about in a separate dedicated video because Fallout 76 had one of its regular blunders, and that's actually what has happened again. Many players were upset to find out about the newest microtransactions, and no, I'm not talking about the utility items, but a $30 bundle which features numerous faction-specific items. What players have been criticizing is Bethesda adding content that arguably should be free and unlocked by playing the game, but also what's worse about this bundle is if there's one item you want, you are forced to buy the entire bundle because the items are not available separate, which you have to believe that this is oddly convenient for Bethesda. As they continue to find ways to suck the wallets of their most loyal fans dry, it's become obvious just how greedy they are willing to be. I've complained in the past, actually right around launch, about the absurd pricing of cosmetics in Fallout 76's Atomic Shop, and charging now half the price of a $60 AAA game for these items just comes off as pathetic. On the Fallout 76 subreddit, players have voiced their displeasure with Bethesda's latest monetization scheme. One of the top posts demanding Bethesda stop selling Atom Shop items only in bundles, let us buy items separately. There's more than money and greed. I mean, forcing people to pay 2,800 atoms, that's just not acceptable when it's most times only 1 or 2 items one might want to buy. That's so far the most shady business deal I've ever come across. I mean, 2,800? For that money I can buy season passes on other games or even full games. Just crazy. Another player admitted that they've fallen for Bethesda's greedy practices in the past, but now they are drawing the line. This crap is not fun. I just want to play the game for a reward, not just throw my wallet at you. And there are many more posts just like these ones, but there's additionally another issue that has emerged with the microtransaction store. Some of the newest Atomic Shop items that Bethesda has released are bugged, which has obviously upset many players who spent money on these items that they expected to, work. That seems to be a constant problem Bethesda has been facing lately, releasing updates or new content, which is broken. Outside of Bethesda Game Studios, the drama surrounding the publisher of Bethesda has been an even bigger mess. First, the Wolfenstein VR game Cyberpilot launched to very poor reviews, and the bigger release Wolfenstein Youngblood released to very not so good reviews as well. And again, a constant theme is emerging, and that is Bethesda pushing for microtransactions. Even with it being cosmetic only in Youngblood, some players have pointed out how the premium currency gold bars negatively affect the balance of the game. Also, like Ubisoft with Assassin's Creed Odyssey recently, Bethesda made sure to kill fast the workaround of the game's microtransactions, because like with Ubisoft, this isn't about quality and integrity like they claim, it's about protecting the greedy, somewhat egregious microtransactions that are included to make money. That's the only reason why they're there, people. Now with Youngblood, it appears the original plans for the microtransactions may have been worse, like Bethesda walked back a statement from a developer on the game who said they had convenience microtransactions in place in which players could use gold bars on weapon upgrades to quote-unquote speed things up. When backlash emerged from these reported comments, Bethesda walked back this statement and said it was untrue and the game was just cosmetic only. I guess a lot of people took the billion-dollar corporation's word for it, but I personally don't believe the developer misspoke. Furthermore, Bethesda managed to anger many with bringing the first 3 Doom games to modern consoles and requiring users to log into a Bethesda account, which is odd considering these are offline games. Why did they do this? I have to wonder if they are preparing for the inevitable annoying subscription service like Ubisoft's Uplay. Now, Bethesda was very fast to respond and again walked it back and claimed it was just a mistake and it was supposed to be optional. They also responded to an apparent bug that emerged where the Xbox 360 releases for Doom and Doom 2 were inaccessible from the ready-to-install dashboard on the Xbox One. Some thought that Bethesda did this to encourage the recently released re-releases, but I just have to say it's quite surprising how often these billion-dollar corporations make quote-unquote mistakes that would only help them financially if there wasn't outrage or complaints made. Just a little odd if we're being honest here. The one good thing that did come from this mini debacle was the memes, with many mocking how Bethesda required users to log in on classic games by putting the message in many other non-Bethesda classic games. Many times in recent months I've raised concerns for the future of this publisher, and I'll have a more in-depth video in the future addressing these concerns, but there is a noticeable trend developing, which is the increase in monetization systems and the exploration of more live service games. It also certainly isn't reassuring seeing id Software's top guy quitting all of a sudden. That was actually something announced days ago, and while many may not see that as a big deal, it definitely has me concerned. After 24 years, Tim Willett's studio director called it quits and is moving on. So yeah, the future of Bethesda as a publisher is really something that I'm not a fan of, based on the business decisions that they have been making. But to the developer side, Bethesda Game Studios outlined at QuakeCon in a roadmap some of the things coming soon to Fallout 76, and I mean, it looks solid, but it's difficult to get excited when there still is so many technical issues and the monetization nonsense is not slowing down. Speaking of games that have technical problems, we next have is EA BioWare's Anthem, which I have to imagine sometime this week, or actually it looks like it's going to be sometime next week, they'll finally announce or release the Cataclysm. Recently there have been some pre-Cataclysm events going on in free play, and like with Bethesda's Fallout 76, the new content has resulted in some problems, including numerous crashes and some of the new events being bugged. For what it's worth, these events aren't really all that interesting anyway. It's pretty much you shooting some crystals that have emerged on the map while battling against the usual enemies. There's currently a storm cloud and Anthem signifying the Cataclysm is near, but when I went to take a look, this is actually when my game hard crashed. But as I have said in the past, there is little to no interest remaining in Anthem. Almost nobody's streaming or playing the game, it looks like. And with BioWare going quiet, they really have to come out with a bang to get people to return or even buy the game to begin with, and I just don't know if that will happen. I'm sure the game store will be revamped to encourage more microtransaction sales, and I'm certain there will be a lot of new content released. Hopefully everything that was supposed to come a few months ago but was indefinitely delayed, and honestly at this point I think BioWare needs to have much more than even just that. Like the loot system needs to be finally fixed, there needs to be more weapon variety, and even then I just have to wonder if it's too little too late. Now for EA, other than Anthem struggling, they have been facing criticism for weeks with Battlefield 5, with many players discouraged by the sheer amount of bugs and technical issues. EA DICE has been taking this issue on as of late, but on top of that, there have been complaints made with the lack of content compared to previous entries. Battlefield 5 really has been an interesting live service because it clearly needed more development time, and the Battle Royale mode Firestorm has mostly been a bust, with many players having trouble even finding enough players on a server to get a game started. The unfortunate reality is that many feel that Firestorm firestorm was just a waste of resources when it really should have been dedicated to other aspects of the experience that are currently months after launch still lacking. But for EA, none of this really is new. Their non-sports games have been struggling for a long time, which is why they rely heavily on their sports games like FIFA. But they did take a very big hit in the stock market recently when it was revealed that Konami had secured the exclusive rights to Italian Series A soccer team Juventus for PES 2020 from FIFA 2020. EA's share value dropped by 3.5%. What this really just shows is how important FIFA is to Electronic Arts' financial success. The Ultimate Team mode and copies sold for the annual release bring in a boatload of revenue, and anything that hurts that, it has a massive effect on the entire company. This is why EA has tried flipping the script, identifying loot boxes as surprise mechanics, because if the feature receives regulation, Electronic Arts, which relies on it for its Ultimate Team mode, will be damaged severely. Right now though, EA and many other gaming publishers continue taking advantage of old, outdated gambling laws to try and claim their predatory, greedy monetization schemes are ethical, when they really aren't. What they are harmful, and even with the dumb headlines like this, it's not truthful to the real picture. The United Kingdom has outdated gambling laws, and gaming companies are taking advantage of that. The United Kingdom Gambling Commission chief regulator said he had significant concerns, but based on their current law, it isn't gambling, although I have to imagine that may change down the road. All of this madness is what this gaming industry currently is, and with EA and Activision continuing to have a rough year, you better believe what's ahead is more greedy monetization schemes to make up for the losses in revenue. This is why I have little faith that Activision's big holiday release Call of Duty Modern Warfare will not be riddled in predatory monetization a few months after launch. If EA's Anthem ever has a comeback, surely it will come at the cost of more microtransactions being implemented. With Bethesda, they are a private company, so it's always been difficult to fully understand what is happening internally, but based on the actions in the last 12 months, clearly priorities have changed, and chasing the live service bandwagon, even if it damages quality, is something the executives in charge care about. All of the news that we have discussed today, and there's even more I wasn't able to really discuss without this being an hour-long video, but all of this is deeply concerning and happening more often. It makes me wonder how much worse it could or will get for consumers. Anyway, what is your opinion on the latest trouble facing some of gaming's biggest publishers? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter, giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video form, so do make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games, and again, thank you for joining. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later. So, for the last few months, I've been investing quite a bit of time into some of the recent big live service experiences. More specifically, I've been playing games like Red Dead Online, Anthem, Black Ops 4, Battlefield 5, and Fallout 76, slowly going insane. No, but seriously, the reason why I've been playing these games is to better understand what each experience is evolving into. With Black Ops 4, it's turned into a greedy disaster, what a surprise. With Fallout 76 and Red Dead Online, there very well could be a bright future ahead. I feel it's important when criticizing or discussing games as a service that I am somewhat keeping up with those experiences post-controversy. Now, as you can see in the background, I have finally returned to Battlefront 2, a game that never reached its full potential because of EA's greed at launch. I am still very thankful it backfired on them, but what's unfortunate about Battlefront 2 is that it's not a bad gameplay experience, arguably one of the best active shooter experiences out there right now, and major props to DICE, the developer, because it has only improved with time. What Star Wars Battlefront 2 has proven to me is that an anti-consumer business model can ruin an experience for everybody, no matter the quality of the actual game. There are many who will never return or give any of these live service experiences I just mentioned a second chance because of the rocky launches games each suffered. First impressions matter, and this AAA industry is the worst at releasing these types of games. Just look at Middle-earth: Shadow of War, a single-player game that pulled a bunch of nonsense, and months after launch, when all interest was lost, the developer finally removed the horrendous loot box system, admitting it was a mistake, but at that point it was too late. Electronic Arts is a game publisher that has pulled nonsense for years, and made a lot of money from unsustainable greed, and for the last few years, starting with really Star Wars Battlefront 2, they have been enjoying the consequences of those actions, and today, we take a look at EA's latest decline and what it could mean moving forward. But if you have not already, do consider subscribing for all the latest gaming news, and turn notifications on so you don't miss out on any new content. Nonetheless, Electronic Arts is a publisher that does not learn from their mistakes, and you could make an argument that they truly cannot learn from their mistakes because nothing is more profitable than using predatory, manipulative, slimy microtransactions like loot boxes to satisfy investors. Recently, it was revealed that EA's executives would not be accepting their performance bonuses, and my goodness, isn't that quite generous? Well, at least IGN and many other gaming outlets would make you believe that. But I also wonder why they even deserve a bonus for all the BS they continue to pull, and let's be honest, outside of FIFA, there's been a lot of failures across the board and mistakes made. But either way, instead reportedly EA's executives are putting this money in a separate pool for employees, consisting of just under $5 million. Electronic Arts, in a report to the SEC, had this to say in regards to giving up the bonuses. While we are disappointed with our fiscal 2019 results, we understand the challenges we face, and we will continue to focus on how we can apply the strengths of our company to capitalize on our opportunities. Now, I noticed some publications or outlets, like I just mentioned before, applauding this decision, but I have to ask, was this out of real generosity or what I think's more likely a good PR move? I say that because EA CEO Andrew Wilson made $35.7 million in fiscal year 2018. EA CFO Blake Jorgensen made $19.2 million in fiscal year 2018. EA CTO or Chief Technology Officer Kenneth Moss made $14.5 million. EA's Chief Marketing Officer Chris Bruzzo made $5.7 million, and EA's Chief Studio Officer Laura Meal made $6.9 million in fiscal year 2019. And now former Chief Design Officer Patrick Soderlund made an outrageous $48.3 million in fiscal year 2018. My point is, these EA executives aren't hurting at all, and you have to wonder how the 350 plus employees who were laid off earlier in the year feel about this generosity now. I certainly have to believe if these executives actually cared, they could have saved those jobs. Just look at Nintendo a few years ago. With things not going very well at the time, CEO Satoru Iwata refused to lay off staff and cut his salary in half. Other executives also took 20 to 30% pay cuts. More recently, unlike other developers in this industry, Nintendo chose to delay Animal Crossing to ensure their employees have a good work-life balance. This decision cost them $1 billion in stock market value, but it's clear they actually care about their employees and don't want them crunching. That's what I call real generosity, unlike Electronic Arts, who has a reputation of, killing game studios. Currently though, Electronic Arts is struggling. That's kind of been the theme of 2019 for them, but since July 2nd, EA's stock has slumped by just over 10%, which in stock market value means they have lost more than $3.6 billion. Now, all the way back in February when Apex Legends Surprise released, I made a video pointing out that EA was saved by that game's success. They have not had a hit in a long time outside of their sports games, and Respawn Entertainment delivered. In past months, it was revealed both of EA's recent $60 games DICE's Battlefield 5 and BioWare's Anthem underperformed. So Apex Legends' massive success was something the investing world was ecstatic about, and many thought that Apex Legends could eventually challenge Fortnite for the top Battle Royale experience, but that's not what has happened. The interest in Apex Legends has drastically been dropping, cooling off since release, and following the Season 2 launch, many investors were disappointed by the lack of interest coming via Twitch viewership. Apex Legends still is one of the most played games, but being that it is free to play and relies on microtransaction sales, its best days may be behind. And many analysts had, in my opinion, unrealistic expectations that Apex Legends would boost up in interest like Fortnite has with its updates. As Bloomberg reported reported last Friday, a lot of people were expecting this season to kind of blow them out of the water. Nick Licouris, an investment advisor covering video games at Gerber Kawasaki Inc. said, "I was not too impressed and EA really needs Apex Legends to be cross-platform in order to take it to the next level. That was one great thing that Fortnite did. Apex Legends is finally cooling off, and I personally find it as one of the better live service battle royale experiences on the market, at least coming from Electronic Arts. Still not a fan of loot boxes in any paid capacity, cosmetic or not, but what Respawn Entertainment provided EA back in February was a short-term boost, and we're now seeing expectations coming back to reality, which is that outside of EA sports games, they are struggling. BioWare's Anthem is practically dead, and while I fully expect some massive updates this month, including the Grand Cataclysm, which might I add has been improving, well at the very least the weather effects have improved, and that's based on some of the footage coming from I believe the test server, but at this point with Anthem's inevitable big content push, you could make an argument that it's too little too late. BioWare's decision to go dark has been an interesting one that we'll find out soon if it was smart, but right now there's been little to no communication for the last 2 months, with the major content in the game's first roadmap still delayed with no timetable of release. And the majority of players have moved on. EA has said they are committed to BioWare and Anthem, but as I've said recently, if that new content does not get the interest that Electronic Arts wants, I definitely think resources and developers will be pulled and moved to Dragon Age 4, the next BioWare experience. Anthem at this point is not selling many new copies, viewership is gone on Twitch, the player size is plummeted, and the microtransaction store is lackluster. With the next content push, I can almost guarantee the microtransaction store will be revamped because Anthem currently is not making much from microtransactions and already underperformed sales-wise. Another game that's had its struggles is Battlefield 5, which right now developer DICE has been facing criticism from their community who are unhappy about all the technical issues and bugs that still face the game. Like with many of these live service experiences, DICE has been criticized for how unfinished Battlefield 5 feels, with thus far a lack of enjoyable post-launch content, while game modes continue to be removed. Players have also been unhappy with how much attention microtransactions have received. Like certain microtransaction related issues have been resolved fast, while the more glaring issues related to the actual gameplay seem to be still unresolved 8+ months after launch, which honestly I think is unacceptable. When you have numerous players referring to Battlefield 5 and Anthem as scams, you know there is a problem. And it's not like this is new, as previous EA titles like Battlefront, Mass Effect Andromeda, and Battlefront 2 have faced similar criticism. All of this has and continues to contribute to EA's struggles, and their answer to these struggles is just adding more and more microtransaction opportunities to really everything. Matt Bilby, Executive Vice President of Strategic Growth at EA, recently told GamesIndustry.biz, "25 years at EA and I still struggle with the external perception that we're just a bunch of bad guys. We love making and playing games. Unfortunately, when we make mistakes on games, the world knows about it because it's of a size and a scale." See, Electronic Arts has some of gaming's best talent and does some amazing things with their EA Originals publishing program that has produced some great smaller games like A Way Out. But let's not beat around the bush. Just because EA does some good doesn't excuse all the bad they do. We could sit here for hours going through lists of all the anti-consumer greedy nonsense that they pulled for the last 2 decades. EA has earned its reputation as arguably gaming's greediest and most manipulative publisher that chooses to ignore the damage that they are inflicting with features like loot boxes and pay-to-win mechanics. Just days ago, the gaming subreddit exploded in anger when a post highlighted just how greedy and predatory EA has gotten with its mobile titles. In NBA Live, they were selling a 106 overall Zion Williamson card for $100, not including taxes, and other virtual cards for RJ Barrett and Ja Morant were the same price as a full-price AAA experience. What's even worse is that this is all temporary. With the next NBA season coming about in a few months, all of this progress will be lost when things get annually rebooted. This is the definition of predatory monetization that makes EA the bad guys. Everyone watching this video probably thinks who's crazy enough to buy something like that, and the answer is those addicted to the game. If something at the time considered absurd like Horse Armor DLC could be such a massive success for Bethesda, just imagine how appealing and profitable pay-to-win microtransactions can be. EA blatantly preys on these vulnerable players' gambling-like addiction, and unfortunately because of this greed, for years this is the nonsense they continue to get away with. As evidenced by the comment section to this NBA Live Reddit post, and even from my own experience, this is not just NBA 2K which has this horrendous business model. Every EA developed mobile game, from FIFA to Madden to Star Wars Galaxy Heroes to Command & Conquer Rivals, they all do this crap, and in some cases it's even more egregious. This is the mobile gaming industry and why I cannot respect it at all. As recently pointed out by Jim Sterling, you have mobile game developers like this guy, presenting ways to exploit audiences and very early on saying the following.
The tricks on how to monetize a game well. Some of you will probably be slightly shocked by all the tricks I have listed here, but I'll leave the morality of it out of the talk. We can discuss it if we have time later. So
I just want to put an emphasis on this, but that remark came at the beginning of the presentation on how to exploit people into paying for microtransactions, and you better understand a majority of this industry doesn't care to even discuss the morality of their actions, because they don't care. Also, this notion that whales are super wealthy Wall Street traders is absurd. Most of the time it's some normal guy or kid using an average middle class salary getting manipulated into spending money they cannot afford to spend. That's the horror this industry fails to and doesn't want to acknowledge, which, being that we're talking specifically about Electronic Arts in this video, it's evidenced by their own actions that they don't care about consumers and the damage that they are inflicting. So, Electronic Arts is financially struggling, losing billions in market value, with their stock continuing to fall today. This is a gaming company that is desperately fighting the anti-loot box and pay-to-win legislation proposed in the United States Senate, because if that bill passes, that EA stock, along with many other publishers, will tank. These companies, the leaders of this industry, rely on manipulation, and monetization in mobile and AAA games will only continue to get worse because these companies don't care about consumers. They care about investors. There's some analysts saying the answer to EA's problems is increasing mobile revenue. The thing is, it will never be good enough because investors always want to see growth, and EA shot up to the top of this industry through greed, and the only way they continue to grow is through greed. But with more studies linking their monetization money-making surprise mechanic features to gambling and growing public scrutiny over microtransactions and rushed to unfinished live service experiences, EA is most definitely in trouble long term, and as a consumer I can only sit back and say, what did you expect to happen? This was an inevitable outcome. Electronic Arts owns and has developed some of the greatest video games ever, but in this current day it's run by a bunch of soulless executives who wish to find any way possible to shove more live services and microtransactions down consumers' throats. Honestly, maybe that's how the company's always been since Trip Hawkins left years ago. But Electronic Arts, if they had their way, those $100 pay-to-win microtransactions and their NBA Live mobile game would be in their console games as well. That was the plan with Star Wars Battlefront 2, and it backfired, having an effect that EA and this whole gaming industry never wanted to confront: real consequences for predatory greed in the form of government scrutiny and potential legislation. Anyway, as it stands, EA's answer to its latest financial issues probably will be to continue increasing microtransactions in all of their games. And with Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order only months away, maybe their stock does recover, but as I've said throughout this video, their current business model isn't a long-term solution, it's a long-term problem that could come crumbling down if the United States government passes the anti-loot box bill. So what do you make of the latest problems facing Electronic Arts and their belief that they are not the bad guys? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter, giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video form, so do make sure to follow me over there. Also, check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games. And again, thank you for joining. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.
Well, first, we don't call them loot boxes. I think that was
whatever term you wish to apply
yeah,
to them. Do you consider them ethical?
So what we look at as surprise mechanics.
So, one of my primary fears with governments getting involved in any capacity and taking action against gaming issues like loot boxes and predatory monetization has been the real possibility that the scope may become larger, and government bodies worldwide start taking a look at other things. And the other day when Epic Games and Electronic Arts spoke to the UK Parliament, it confirmed my suspicions a little bit, but it also proved one massive issue that this whole industry cannot seem to understand. That simply is, this industry is too incompetent to realize that not self-regulating will have severe consequences. Today we have a lot to discuss. I've purposefully neglected to tackle this topic for the last few weeks because I wanted to see how it developed. So we are going to be going over updates surrounding the United States anti-loot box bill introduced by Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, the EA CEO's newest defense of surprise mechanics, the latest predatory monetization done by Bethesda, Activision, and 2K Games, Polygon's bizarre defense of the video game industry, which essentially boils down to think about the billionaires, because yes, we have to think about them. And lastly, of course, the very concerning comments Electronic Arts and Epic Games gave to the UK Parliament just a few days ago. Lots of quote-unquote surprises within this video, but if you haven't already, consider subscribing for all the latest gaming news and turn notifications on so you don't miss out on any new content. Also, do check out and follow my other social media accounts, like Twitter especially, since YouTube is full of quite a few surprises these days, which has me concerned for the future. Nonetheless, the Entertainment Software Association, the lobbyist trade group that represents most of the video game publishers, that includes Bethesda, Electronic Arts, Activision Blizzard, Epic Games, Konami, Ubisoft, Nintendo, Tencent, Deep Silver, and so on and so forth, have been fighting legislation for years, and they've been successful for the most part. But I'm going to be honest, things have changed, and if I had to identify a point where everything changed, I think it's without a doubt when Electronic Arts tried turning Star Wars Battlefront 2, a beloved franchise, into Star Wars Ultimate Team, which that was obviously in late 2017 when all that controversy occurred. At that moment, it finally exposed to the world outside of gaming how serious predatory monetization has become, and how many of these entertainment companies are run by corporate vultures who have little to no care of how loot boxes that really are slot machines can be harmful to players, especially children. Recently, we had EA's FIFA Ultimate Team developers addressing accusations of predatory monetization, which some players have described as pay to win. These EA developers could not stop laughing throughout this interview because they think this subject is so hilarious, but essentially their defense of the game's loot boxes boils down to, have you seen those YouTube videos where players have no money spent teams? It's possible to get a good team that way, so I guess that excuses the predatory nature of the mode, which, like any of these sports games, almost forces you to spend real-world money on microtransactions, or you, the player, face a ridiculous grind wall, which could take hundreds, maybe even thousands of hours to get the cards that you want or need to compete. Oh, and also something else I found rather interesting about this interview is the amount of times these FIFA developers repeated they didn't view the game's loot boxes as gambling. As I said before, and as I'll say now, you can keep telling yourself that, but it's not true. You have to wonder how many players are being taken advantage by these gambling mechanics, not knowing they're spending thousands of dollars on a predatory video game. In this one case, you had a guy who submitted a GDPR request, finding and probably realizing he has an addiction problem, spending thousands of dollars on a mechanic that is closer to a slot machine than baseball cards. Electronic Arts certainly isn't the only company using this feature. Activision has been slowly making Call of Duty Black Ops 4 more and more greedy, recently adding weapons to the game's loot boxes like we all knew eventually would happen. But what's even worse is that one of the DLC weapons that you can only find in the game's loot boxes was overpowered, with those lucky enough to obtain the weapon demanding the developer Treyarch to nerf it, which they eventually did. But even outside of console gaming, you have Bethesda with the Elder Scrolls Blades doing the exact same BS, which really is the perfect representation of why most gamers can't take mobile gaming seriously. The video game industry has a real problem that they wish to ignore, which that dumb decision is and already has brought consequences. Obviously, thus far only Belgium and the Netherlands have made rulings banning certain loot box features, but I truly believe this is just the beginning. There's governments worldwide investigating, and the Entertainment Software Association just continues to fight. In the United States recently, the ESA told the Washington Post that they had successfully defeated in 2018 24 bills aimed at regulating loot boxes that were introduced in 9 states. But here in 2019, the problem isn't going away, as this has now become a larger issue as a bill has been introduced on a federal level with bipartisan support. The bill specifically says that it would find it unlawful for a game publisher to publish a minor-oriented game that includes pay-to-win microtransactions or loot boxes, or, and this is extremely important since many game publishers like Electronic Arts and Activision like introducing predatory microtransactions after launch, once copies are sold and reviews are written, it would be unlawful for a publisher to update an existing minor-oriented game that would enable pay-to-win microtransactions or loot boxes in such game. As I said before, this bill has received bipartisan support. Senator Josh Hawley is a conservative from Missouri, and the two Democrats that endorse this bill include Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, who states Congress must send a clear warning to app developers and tech companies: children are not cash cows to exploit for profit. And the other senator to endorse the bill is Ed Markey of my home state Massachusetts, who stated, "Today's digital entertainment ecosystem is an online gauntlet for children, inherently manipulative game features that take advantage of kids and turn playtime into pay time should be out of bounds." Now, as one might expect, the video game industry was not happy about this bill's announcement, with the ESA slamming back, saying in a statement, "This legislation is flawed and riddled with inaccuracies. It does not reflect how video games work, nor how our industry strives to deliver innovative and compelling entertainment experiences to our audiences. The impact of this bill would be far-reaching and ultimately prove harmful to the player experience, not to mention the more than 220,000 Americans employed by the video game industry. We encourage the bill's co-sponsors to work with us to raise awareness about the tools and information in place that keep the control of video game play and in-game spending in parents' hands rather than in the government's." Look, I would agree with that position if this gaming industry was doing anything about scaling back on predatory monetization features like loot boxes, one that has been linked directly to gambling, but this industry just doesn't want to do anything, which is the core problem. Many game companies like Electronic Arts, Activision Blizzard, and Take-Two Interactive have built their businesses on unsustainable greed, and they rely on predatory monetization to satisfy investors, which is something that long-term cannot work. Heck, many of these companies have hit a ceiling already, which unfortunately means tons of lost jobs and studio closures. But just look at a game like NBA 2K19, already loaded with slimy microtransactions that players have complained about with every year's new installment, but just recently 2K Games, the developer, has expanded on monetization by incorporating unskippable in-game advertisements in a $60 game. The game publishers are going to keep pushing forward with more and more monetization opportunities until something is done about this. It will only get worse for players. So, Josh Hawley, speaking to Kotaku, did state that FIFA Ultimate Team is indeed one of his games being targeted with this proposed legislation, something Electronic Arts is obviously not pleased with. He specifically said, "FIFA would indeed be covered by this legislation, to be clear. Electronic Arts has certainly expressed their, shall we say, concern over this legislation, but I think that's probably a good indication that we're getting somewhere." Just recently, GameDaily.biz actually discussed with Electronic Arts CEO Andrew Wilson his thoughts on loot boxes, and I found it very interesting that he downplayed that terminology, saying, "Whether it's direct purchase or this mystery box style that's become commonly referred to as loot boxes, we really think about 4 key vectors: value, fairness, choice, and fun. We want to feel like we got a good deal." Now, he would further defend loot boxes and make it seem like they are actively addressing this issue. They're not. We want to talk to a lot of regulators around the world. There's no sleight of hand here. If it's ultimately found that any form of monetization is inappropriate, we'll do something different. Many territories and many regulators have tested it and found it to be completely fine in the same way that collecting baseball cards or KISS cards is fine. So, what we did last year ahead of, I think, anyone in the industry is we went out and we started providing odds and being very transparent about the chances that you're going to get whatever it might be in one of those packs. We're going to continue to do that because our objective was never to be opaque. The important thing to note is that many countries have not declared it completely fine, and an Australian study already proved that the comparison to baseball cards is inaccurate. Oh, and countries like China actually have laws forcing game companies to show pack odds, so this isn't taking action, this is doing the bare minimum. Now, I started this video with a clip of EA's Vice President of Legal and Government Affairs, Kerry Hopkins, speaking to the UK Parliament, telling them what I consider a lie, that they, being Electronic Arts, actually call loot boxes surprise mechanics. I find it rather interesting whenever a certain term like games as a service receives tons of scrutiny and outrage, a new term is invented by this industry to replace the old controversial one, which in this case all I hear nowadays are live service experiences, but even then that'll likely evolve into something else soon. Electronic Arts can try escaping loot boxes, but they are the one company that has profited off this slimy, greedy monetization the most. Now, Carrie Hopkins did have further comment that I want to briefly go over because it shows how Electronic Arts truly feels. So she describes these surprise mechanics by bringing up someone going to Target for a toy.
What you'll find is that this is something people enjoy. They enjoy surprises. And so it's something that's been part of toys for years, whether it's Kinder Eggs or Hatchimals or LOL Surprise. We do think the way that we have implemented these kind of mechanics, and FIFA, of course, is our big one, our FIFA Ultimate Team and our packs, is actually quite ethical and quite fun, enjoyable to people.
At this point, I just feel like this gaming industry likes to throw whatever dumb defense they can come up with and see if it sticks. There is no scientific research or studies that have found loot boxes are like toys, but there have been a few big studies finding the opposite. Loot boxes aren't like Kinder Eggs or baseball cards. They are slot machines, Electronic Arts.
We agree with the UK Gambling Commission, the Australian Gambling Commission, and many other gambling commissions that they aren't gambling, and we also disagree that there's evidence that shows it leads to gambling. Instead, we think it's like many other products that people enjoy in a very healthy way, and like the element of surprise.
I wish that this Electronic Arts representative would just start laughing, because not one person is buying this BS argument. It's also quite laughable EA disagrees with the studies disproving the dumb defense that they keep making. Anyway, this EA rep would continue on claiming that what they have with FIFA Ultimate Team is quite ethical and enjoyable, which to that I would ask then, if you fully support surprise mechanics and think everyone loves them, why remove them from Battlefront 2? Why promote Jedi Fallen Order with the promise of no loot boxes? You cannot have this both ways, and there is nothing ethical about turning a game into a casino. While this part has been the main focus of anger from gamers, what I find even more concerning is Epic Games' response to the UK Parliament on excessive playtime, because as I feared, the scope is growing and governments are inquiring about other aspects of gaming. Unfortunately, this video game industry has given governments worldwide the impression that they cannot self-regulate anymore, which means more scrutiny is coming for other aspects of gaming, like how long kids are playing a game or how mature content is handled in a game. The video game industry as a whole is to blame for this, and with EA and Epic Games sounding incompetent in front of Parliament, it just tells me that things could get even worse if something doesn't change. At one point, Epic Games' legal counsel told the UK Parliament that it was inaccurate to define Epic as a company which makes money from people playing its games, to which the committee chair responded, "You are not a charity." The issue with any regulation on loot boxes is that it could open the floodgates to other aspects of games that lawmakers take issue with, which is why I find it foolish that this industry does not want to self-regulate. They are fighting a losing battle. Polygon recently had an article that defended loot boxes, essentially saying that how else can companies like EA make $1 billion every year with FIFA? And to that I would argue, why is that my problem? These games existed before without loot boxes and were still quite profitable, and I can guarantee without predatory monetization they still will or would make a lot of money. If these companies need loot boxes and other pay-to-win mechanics to make $1 billion, I think that isn't my problem. That's a company's who's being greedy's problem. At one point in this article, Polygon tries arguing because an NBA 2K's developers' kids like having the choice to spend money to have their players grade immediately, and I guess is an excuse for companies like Electronic Arts and 2K Games implementing horrendous, pathetic monetization systems that exploit its players. I think one of the main points I wanted to make with this video is that regulation is inevitable and a slippery road. I've said for a long time self-regulation is what this gaming industry should do. They need to recognize this problem and properly address it, but they won't because it brings too much money in. These game executives could care less about their employees, the products they release, or their consumers. It's always going to be about the money. The ESA has chosen to fight these loot box bills, and based on rulings made in countries like Belgium, clearly that strategy is not entirely working. An important thing to note is that Take-Two Interactive's CEO Strauss Zelnick is on the board of the ESA, and as has also defended loot boxes. The CEO of ZeniMax, which owns Bethesda, Robert Altman, is the chairman of the ESA's board. The ESA represents most of this gaming industry, and right now, I'm of the opinion that because this gaming industry doesn't want to change, government regulation is their fault, and I'm having trouble feeling bad for companies like Activision, who avoid paying taxes and are all around horrible to workers and consumers. My one hope is that government regulation, like in Belgium, will stick just to predatory monetization and not turn into something else, but time will tell. And definitely, I think it's unfortunate but not all that surprising that this gaming industry has chosen a dangerous path, which at the very least will come with a lot of fun surprises. Anyway, what is your opinion on the defenses being made for loot boxes by the video game industry? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video form, so make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games. And again, thank you for joining, consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later. No Man's Sky accomplished arguably gaming's biggest comeback a while ago, and Hello Games, the small developer behind that game, continue improving and expanding on that game to millions of players. What Sean Murray and his team have been able to do is or was unprecedented at the time, but now it feels like in this current live service age, game comebacks are happening more often. But it's definitely not always a guarantee like some may make you believe. No Man's Sky, when it launched all the way back in late 2016, it was riddled in controversy with players who felt betrayed and misled taking their frustrations to social media sites. Games media rightfully criticized the lackluster state of the game and pointed out all of the missing promised features. Players took it a step further, composing long lists full of various promised features that were not in the game and demanded answers and also government investigations into false advertising. Meanwhile, during this disastrous launch, Sean Murray and his Hello Games team decided to go dark and work on improving the game. About 3 years later, I would say Hello Games has done more than enough with supporting and really reviving this game, leading by example by creating massive updates with zero microtransactions, something that you don't really ever see. Now, while No Man's Sky has turned it around, it really feels like it was just the beginning of this polarizing live service age in which many much larger game studios are releasing rushed, unfinished, buggy $60 rubbish with the promise that things will improve eventually. Games like Activision's Black Ops 4, BioWare's Anthem, and Bethesda's Fallout 76 are just some of those that fall into that category. Well, anyway, recently Hello Games' Sean Murray gave his thoughts on this polarizing live service age and had a similar "it's not how you start, it's what it becomes" defense that Todd Howard actually made just over a month ago. Today we're going to be taking a look at Sean Murray's full comments, which feel or are a defense of these controversial live service games, which at launch have almost all been hit by a lot of angry consumers and critical reception. But as usual, if you have not already, do consider subscribing for all the latest gaming news and turn notifications on so you do not miss out on any new content. So I think it's important that before I get to Sean Murray's comments that I emphasize that No Man's Sky has evolved into something amazing that a lot of people enjoy, but there were a lot of mistakes made, particularly with marketing and communication, that I think is foolish to forget, largely because you would have hoped this gaming industry learned from the mistakes made with No Man's Sky, but that's not what has happened. The mistakes made are continuing to be made by gaming's biggest developers, and I would say the problems are getting worse with executives purposefully launching $60 live service experiences that are not ready, with the expectation that they'll just, improve it with time. No Man's Sky is not a live service experience, as it doesn't include microtransactions or charge for new content and updates in any way, but it is often the game people reference when talking about what divisive games like Fallout 76 or even Anthem could evolve into. Recently, Sean Murray, the founder of Hello Games, spoke with GamesIndustry.biz about the current state of No Man's Sky, the rough launch, and the rise in polarizing games. First, we'll go over his thoughts on how games like Anthem and Fallout 76 don't deserve the backlash that they have received. All games that had maybe a lukewarm launch or were announced dead on arrival, I think there is way too much emphasis from all of us as an industry on day one sales and the heat of the community reaction, and far less on what the long-term impact of these games are and what the plans for them are. We want as an industry to do crazy, silly, ambitious things. Sure, we're critical of things that come out and we're not happy when it's fair to not be happy, when things aren't what we wanted them to be, but we also need to have that patience with ambitious things and to support them because that's what we want from the industry. Well, you know what I want from this industry, this AAA gaming industry: complete games day one, with what's advertised in the actual game when it's released, you know, when it's being sold to me for money. I really can't understand why that's such a difficult task. I spoke privately with a Bethesda Game Studios employee recently who told me the company was rushing to release with Fallout 76, a game that could have included more innovative features and ideas, but it would cost more and take too much time, which didn't fit with what leadership wanted. It's clear Sean Murray has been passionate about No Man's Sky and righting his company's wrong, something that he's lucky he gets because Hello Games is a private indie developer that doesn't need to appease investors who only want to see more money and continuing growth. Unlike these massive AAA game companies, Hello Games could not just move on. No matter what, they had to fix No Man's Sky, because if they did not, just imagine the publicity nightmare they'd face with their next game and moving forward. But many of these larger game corporations, from the Electronic Arts to the Activision Blizzards, aren't caring about delivering ambitious games. They want the most profitable games. Sure, the developers are likely passionate, but the executives could care less, and they ultimately are the ones making the decisions and pulling the strings. What I find really interesting about this response made by Sean is that he repeats something Bethesda's Todd Howard said recently about Fallout 76.
We knew that going into this. We knew it's not that, right?
Yeah.
You would say, look, this isn't a game, even from the beginning, this is not going to be like, you know, high Metacritic game. That's not what this is, given what it is. But we felt strongly this is a game we want to play. This is something we really want to do. And all of the games like this, whether it's us or somebody else, you can go back and look at them. There's a period once you launch. It's not how you launch, it's what it becomes.
Look, my issue with games like No Man's Sky, Anthem, and Fallout 76 is all the marketing or comments pre-release that made the game appear as something else. One good example I can bring up is with BioWare's Anthem, in which GM Casey Hudson described the game at E3 2018 this way.
I just want to be able to continue the legacy of the studio, and that's kind of where it started with Anthem, is just thinking about, you know, what is the evolution of a BioWare game? And we wanted to create a brand new world for people to discover, you know, a whole new world of story and character. But we also wanted to do something that was, you know, more of a dynamic and living world, a game that would change every time you came back and played it. We also wanted to do something where, you know, if you wanted to invite your friends into it, then you could do that as well. So that was really the initial vision of the game, not an MMO, not a multiplayer game with stories sort of bolted on the side, but something new and different, and I think the team has really captured that vision over the years.
What players unfortunately found out on release day was that Anthem's story was pretty much stapled on the side, and lackluster, might I add, compared to previous BioWare entries. In a later Kotaku investigation, it would be uncovered that nearly the entire development of Anthem was just a gigantic mess, with the E3 2017 gameplay trailer almost being entirely faked and really being more of a vision of what BioWare wanted to create. Of course, this tale is somewhat the same to an extent with other games like Black Ops 4, Battlefield 5, Fallout 76, and No Man's Sky at launch. When a game developer or whoever speaking on behalf of a game studio says or shows something being one way, I think it probably needs to be that way come release day when I'm spending $60 on this product, or sometimes more, not maybe a few years from now. It really isn't difficult to be transparent with consumers before release. That's a decision, and if you choose to lie, I think the gaming community is right to react with anger. Heck, some of these live service games are breaking promises long after release in regards to, well, monetization. This is what patience got Fallout 76 players, and I mean, it could have been worse based on what players uncovered in the game's code, but thankfully, due to outrage, it appears that original plan was cancelled. Now, Sean Murray would continue reflecting on the aftermath of No Man's Sky's impact on this gaming industry. I think we were right on the cusp, and this was only 3 years ago, of that really intense polarizing reaction that is seen commonly now. It feels like there's a game every 3 months that will have that. I don't know that we now have the rules on how to deal with that, but it is really nice that people will reference us as the kind of benchmark. When I set up Hello Games, I always dreamed of being mentioned in the same sentence as Bethesda. This is not exactly the circumstances I wanted that to happen in, but I'll take it. I'll always delight in someone asking how Bethesda can learn from Hello Games. Actually, all the way back in November 2018, a week after launch, I asked that question and gave my thoughts on how Bethesda could quote-unquote No Man's Sky Fallout 76. In that video, I highlighted the need for human NPCs and the introduction of maybe 2 rival factions, the need for PvP that really doesn't have restriction and increases tension when exploring, not knowing if a player is a friend or a foe, and lastly, mod support ASAP. So far, Bethesda has actually done 2 of those things that I felt was needed, but with any of these rough launches, I emphasize that first impressions do matter. No matter what, people will not and should not forget how things started. This industry should be learning from mistakes, but nope, it just keeps repeating. It's not like this is a